Ladders is a basic but sometimes overlooked skill on the fireground. We ladder for them and for us with a specific intent and purpose. In this class, we'll address the PFA ODs that support ground ladder work, and we'll give you some good solid basics that you can go out and train with your companies to accomplish. On an engine company, you can have a dramatic impact on the fire scene by bringing and throwing ladders to the building. This should not be limited just to the trucks. Don't be scared of throwing ladders. It's a fun skill that you always need to continue to work on to get a little bit better at every day. So first off, let's do a little quick disclaimer. We understand that trying to teach a hands-on class like ladders is very, very tough via Target Solutions. So please let us know if you have any questions, like to get out and train on these concepts. The people involved in creating this class specifically were Kevin Housley, Dustin Hampton, and Carlos Meza. But pretty much every engine company and definitely all the trucks are willing to get out and throw ladders with you. So why do we use ladders? We use them for them, the customer, and for us. So we typically use them for rescue, egress, search access, VEIS, tasks like vertical ventilation, and then for RIC. Ladders here at PFA is supported and required by multiple PFA ODs, which we'll cover here in a second. We want to make sure that when we're laddering these buildings that we're doing it with intent and specific purpose. We want to have a good tactical advantage, so we're not just throwing ladders against the building, but we're intentionally placing them to a spot that gives us a good tactical advantage. Where are companies working above grade? Where do we need ladders for supporting operations that are already going on if we're a RIC team, etc. Once we throw ladders, we want to communicate that location to command and everybody on the fireground so we know where those egress ladders are at. So who should throw ladders? Everyone on the fire scene has the potential to throw ladders. At times we'll see first companies throw ladders, or first in truck companies or second truck companies, but everybody on that fire scene has that potential. That's why it's such a good quality basic skill to continue to train on. Remember that engine ladders are always an option for truck companies. The trucks here at PFA do not carry 24s or 14-foot roof ladders. And so on smaller structures, which we'll cover some of those here later, the members of the truck are planning on using engine ladders to access those so they don't have to get the big ladders off of the trucks. So, DOs, we want to talk about dropping your ladder racks down. With the apparatus specs, with all the ladders riding on top of the engines, it takes a long time for some of these engines, upwards of 30 seconds, to drop these ladder racks down. And if the truck members are willing to, or planning on using those engine ladders as their first option, just try to help them out and drop those ladders down so they can use them. Remember, truck company ladders are always an option for engines as well. So if we have a RIC team or we have multi-alarm companies coming in, we need to be familiar with what's housed on those trucks. So I'd encourage you to get out with your trucks on your shift, see what they carry, throw some of those ladders, get some tips and tricks from them. So DO's dropping your ladder racks down. This is kind of a pretty big point for time savings, as well as realizing that those kind of become an impalement hazard how they come down. So if we have empty ladder racks, it might be a good idea to put them back up so people aren't walking into those ladder racks that don't have ladders on them. But having those ladder racks down and available for use for RIC companies, second-in engine companies, multi-engine companies, and truck companies is a good idea if the DOs don't have time to get them off the rig and throw them. Another good option is the 2-out assignment. We'd highly encourage you to bring your ladders with you. We're not advocating freelancing per se, but bringing your ladders at least up to the scene so then another company, a RIC or truck company, can use them. Typically the officer and the driver aren't bringing any tools with them. If they are, it's just a set of irons. So bring your ladders and your hook and put them either on the building if it makes sense and it's not a freelance, or at least put them in the front of the building so they can be thrown by some of those later arriving companies. So we'll cover some of the quick highlights from our ODs. The ODs are linked into this presentation as well, so you can cover them with your companies. So the first big one obviously is ground laddering, and there's a lot of shalls that are built into these ODs as we go through them. So If we have roof operations, the OD is saying that we shall have 2 means of egress from the roof before a ventilation hole is cut. Based on the shift, different shifts are doing different stuff on who's throwing that secondary egress ladder. So get with those truck companies and figure out what their plan is. The OD also calls about that we want to have, or that we shall have, anything within reach of ground ladders, we shall have ladders up to that operations floor as an alternate or emergency exit for the interior crews. In my career here at PFA, we haven't been really good at this by any means, especially on multifamily fires. So that's kind of the point of this class, is to try to expand the ladder culture here, especially for engine companies, as we continue to grow into a bigger department. The RIC crew, OD, of course, we talked about this a lot during the acquired structure stuff over at the mall. The results acronym, which is in the OD, and the 2 big ones here we want to call it is L for ladders and S, second ladders to the roof. So as that RIT company, we want to make sure that we're super active on laddering these buildings. That's a part of the OD. And then finally, vent, enter, isolate, search. So a lot of times VEIS is performed on floors 2 or above, and so we're using ladders to access these structures. We want to make sure that the second ladder of equal length is pre-positioned at that entry point for rescuers, which falls into that point number 8 there under task considerations of positioning. A second ladder of equal length should be positioned next to the initial ladder for victim removal. It just helps getting people out of these windows. And then that the ladder should be placed at 60 degrees or less at sill of window with easy ingress and egress from the window, meaning that we don't want the tip of that ladder extending into the window when we're throwing it for rescue, because it's going to be very hard to get a patient up over the sill and up over the tip of that ladder if it's thrown incorrectly. The 60 degrees is put in there just to accommodate victim removal a little bit easier down these ladders. So ladder specs, all the engines at PFA carry the same complement of ladders, and all of them are the same manufacturer, which is Duo Safety. In the US, there's 2 ladder manufacturers for the fire service, Duo Safety and Alkalite, and we own both types of those ladders here at PFA, and we'll talk about where those things live here in a second. So on the engines, we carry 10-foot attic ladder, a 14-foot straight roof ladder with hooks, and a 24-foot 2-section extension ladder. The 24, when it's bedded, is a 14-foot straight ladder, so just be aware of that working height. We can go from 14 all the way up to 24, which we'll talk about why that's applicable here in a second. Ladder 5 has a mix of Duo Safety and Alkalites. All their ladders are Duo Safeties except for their 35s. Duo Safeties are lighter than Alkalites, and so when you get these bigger ladders like 35s, they get heavy pretty quick. So I'd encourage you to get with the truck companies again and throw some of these bigger ladders. Also, a nice reminder is out at training, there is a brand new 35 that lives out there, 2-section 35. That's a Duo Safety that's available all the time at the training center. They also have a pretty big cache of ladders from the academy that are available, lots of 24s and things like that you can get out there and throw. So on all the trucks, we're going to carry a 16-foot and a 20-foot straight roof ladder. They're going to carry a 28-foot 2-section extension ladder, which has a closed length, working length of 16 foot. And then ladder 5 specifically carries 2 35s. They also have a parapet ladder up on the stick and the 100-foot aerial. On Tower 1, all their ladders are Duo Safety, so they're going to be lighter than the ladders on ladder 5. They carry a 16 and a 20 and a 28. They only carry 1 35, and then they have a 40, which is a 3-section, which also has a working length of 16 feet. Tower 2 is a mixed as well. They have Duo Safety and Alkalite. The only Alkalite ladder on there is the 40. It's a 2-section 40, but they carry a 16, a 20, a 28, a 35, and a 40. So coming up here in this class, which will be a handoff for companies, is going to be some size up and just starting to figure out how to size these buildings up from the cab. What's a great way for us to be able to ladder these buildings? Can we do that appropriately with what we have on the engines, or do we need to plan to go to the trucks if we're that rig company. So what we're going to use for these is a true story and a garden level. It falls pretty closely into command, the blue card, things like that that we already use. We don't call them true stories, we just call them a 2-story or a 3-story. But these would actually be a true story. So what that means is the first floor is level with or slightly above the grade. So if I walk through the wall from the ground, what happens? Do I fall down? Do I walk right onto the floor? Or do I maybe have to step up like a Victorian style home? So that's going to be a true story. The first floor is level with or slightly above the grade like a Victorian home. The garden level in this picture here we're all familiar with, which is aspen leaf. That garden level means that first floor is below the grade. So if I walk through that wall on floor 1, I'm going to fall down a couple feet. So there's some good rules of thumbs, especially in the residential world, and then once we get into that multifamily world as well. So the rule of thumb on these residential homes, these bi-levels and tri-levels are essentially garden level structures. If you see, if we walk through that wall, we're going to fall down a couple feet into that daylight style basement, what we would call a garden level. Okay, bi-levels and tri-levels are very easily recognizable. Bi-levels typically have that door directly in the center of the home, meaning we have to go either up the stairs or down the stairs right away. We're already doing a great job of sizing these structures up for how much hose do we need to move in there and search and things like that. Okay, so for ladders, if we get on scene of a bi-level or tri-level, and sometimes you hear that incident commander call those things out on their on-scene report, we're instantly thinking that we're using 14s and 24s. 14s are going to go to the windows, including a closed 24-foot extension ladder. That's a 14-foot ladder. And then we're very confident that we can make it to the roof with a 24 as long as we don't have a big grade change. Okay. So always account for those variables, and a variable will be what's the grade actually look like. Is the back maybe a walkout basement with a tri-level showing on the front or something weird, and that's where that 360 follow-up report is very, very important, especially for those later arriving companies in the trucks to know, well, if we're going to the roof or we have some sort of VEIS rescue on the back, what do we have on the back side of these buildings? On this bi-level picture here on the left, you can see the angles. So on the Bravo side there, that's a 16-foot straight roof. It's thrown a little bit up into the window, but you can see pretty shallow angle. And then we have a 14 on the front, so a little bit steeper angle, but very easy to reach that with a 14-foot ladder. On the true 2-story, the rule of thumb is we're going to be able to use pretty much every ladder that we have in the cache. So the 14s are going to be really, really good, especially if we have bedrooms that maybe are above a garage, where we're going to actually just ladder the gutter line and then access those bedrooms off of the roof. Really good thing for the 14s. Sometimes the 14s will reach based on grade. If you look at that multifamily fire on the left, that's a 14 that's reaching because there's a little bit of a berm there that gave them a couple extra feet. But 16s are really going to be our go-tos for that floor 2 windows. So we know we have 16s on the trucks. It's going to be a really steep 14 potentially, which might make victim removal hard, but we'll still be able to get in and out of those windows a lot of times. But we're thinking 24s off the engines pretty quickly. But that doesn't mean that we just leave the 14 next to the tire on the engine. We want to bring that thing up to the scene and maybe use it somewhere else. The Victorian style works really well, and if you remember from Chief Macarini's video from that acquired structure, he talks about that Victorian and that elevated foundation, and that video is linked here for further review as well. But the Victorian style still work from this rule of thumb because typically those window sills are lower and then the windows are taller on how they used to build those homes. So a lot of times the 16s and the 24s are really our go-to for that as well. So walkouts, if we hear walkout, instantly we should be thinking extension ladders, so 24, 28, 35s, and potentially 40s on a lot of times on that Charlie side. So what we hear walkouts, we think extensions. 16s will typically work on walkouts. It's just going to make the angle a little bit steeper, kind of like a 14 on a true 2-story. So get out there, throw some ladders on these buildings in your first due. Buildings that are under construction are a fantastic time to throw them when there's OSB on the side, and that's supported by the department. So garden level, rule of thumb on these multifamilies. These are a little bit funky, and it just takes some time to look at that ground game approach. When we're approaching these buildings, what do we see? So on the picture on the left, which was a fatal fire from 2017, you see 3 different ladders to that building there on a 2-story garden level. You can see that ladder towards Delta is a pretty shallow angle, so I'm guessing that's a 16 and not a 14. Then we have a 28 extended way past the roof line there in case they wanted to do roof ops. And then either a 16 or a 20 next to that. It's probably a 20. Okay. So for garden levels the sill is less than 6 feet off the ground. So if you see the sill on the picture on the left next to the firefighter, next to the meters, it's right on the ground versus this picture that we borrowed from ironsandladders.com. On the right, you have that variable with the concrete, so that sill is 1.5 feet or 2 feet off the ground towards Delta on that picture on the right. So those are going to change just a little bit what we're going to do. If we have a sill that's less than 6 inches off the ground, we're using a 14, 20, 28 rule of thumb. So 14s are easily going to get us to floor 2, 20s are easily going to get us to the 3rd floor sill, and a 28 is going to get us to the roof with 3 rungs above that roof. Anytime there's a variable or you give the old, I'm not entirely sure which ladder, you're going to want to go to the 24 versus any of the other ladders. That 24 is super versatile ladder, where the 20 is the least versatile ladder that we carry on the fire department. So beware of those variables. Get out, take a look at these garden levels in your first due areas, second dues, third dues, and throw some ladders to them and see what works and what doesn't really work. So that's going to wrap this video. In the following slides, which you'll be able to go self-pace through, talk as a crew what ladders you would throw where's your run some scenarios if you have victims, where's fire location, things like that, which ladders are going to work just from these scenarios. These are all pretty popular buildings here in PFA's district, but get out and learn what those funky buildings are, and then try to pass that information along to the shifts around you. So we'll have some buildings, just blank buildings with some X's that mark where we suggest you would throw ladders, and then we'll actually have some pictures where those ladders were thrown. Some of these were just engine companies getting out and doing work, so we only have the 2 ladders to work with, and some of them were a combination of engine and truck. Any questions? Feel free to hit us up, either K. Housley, D. Hamp, or Carlos Mesa, and we'd be happy to help you out. Thanks for the time. In this section, we're going to talk about a couple different ways to carry ladders, deploying them from an engine. It's a good idea to get out there, actually time how long your ladder takes to deploy from the top to the bottom. Just trying to increase that fireground time. Some of these ladders take over 30 seconds to deploy fully from the top bedded on top of the engine all the way down to ready to throw. So in this scenario, we have the ladder fully deployed to the bottom, which isn't always the best thing based on your body size. Firefighter Kite's going to carry both ladders in a high shoulder configuration. On some of these new engines, the ladders are somewhat sticky on these ladder racks. So get out there and mess with how your engine's going to react when you try to pull these ladders off. Here in this example, you'll see the ladders kind of shift. They become unlocked with each other, and you have a little bit of a cantilever of that ladder that he's able to overcome, but it's less than optimal. In this shot, we also added in the New York hook. It's a good idea to bring a tool with you. Firefighter Onakai's carrying both ladders at the same time with a New York hook in that low shoulder configuration. There's a couple different ways to carry the New York hook when you're carrying them with ladders. The first way, as you see here, is he's carrying it in the bed of the 14-foot roof ladder. He secures it with his body, but he also uses the 45-degree angle on the New York head side of the tool to secure it within the bed of the ladder using the rungs to his advantage. The second way to carry this is to carry it on the outside of the beam of the ladder You use the 90-degree end of the New York head of the tool. You lightly tap it into that rung hole, and then you can carry it on top. It's going to secure the tool very well for you, but you have to realize that the chisel end can move around a little bit and ultimately cause the New York hook to fall off of the beam of the ladder. In this example, he's pulling off the roof ladder, sticking the New York hook in on the top beam. Then he's going to carry both ladders in a suitcase configuration. If he would choke his right hand up a little bit further towards the foot of the ladder, then he's not carrying it so far tipped down, might be a little bit easier. This would be a preferred method for when we're deploying both ladders at the same time off of an engine to throw them or bring them up to the fire scene. These ladders are light, and this is an easy way for us to manage that with our air pack, and very easy for a single firefighter to bring 3 tools, 2 ladders, and 1 New York hook. You could even add a Halligan bar into this very, very easily. So on his right shoulder there, we have him have a low shoulder with the 24, and then he's suitcase carrying the New York hook and that 14-foot roof ladder. So get out there, see what works with your personal body type and preference, and figure out what works best deploying these tools off of your engines. As we know, when using ground ladders, speed and efficiency is the name of the game. And so we should intentionally train to try to get better in both of these categories. This section is going to cover a possibility of a new technique when raising a shorter extension ladder like a 24 or a 28 when accessing either a roof line or a second story window for VEIS operations. As we know, we can use, throw, and climb these ladders in the fly-in or fly-out application. So this technique would be for the fly-out application for a quick raise going to that second story window. On approach, we're making sure we clear overhead, and then we're going for speed and efficiency. The ladder was thrown in the fly-out application, and instead of having to roll the ladder to manipulate the halyard and then either use the ladder in the fly-in application or roll the ladder back to use it in the fly-out application, simply secure the ladder using the left side of your body in this scenario. Reach down and grab either the second to last or the last rung and essentially do a bicep curl to get the 2 clicks that we'll need to access that second floor. This technique takes some practice to figure out the best spot to grab the ladder and how to hold it based on your body type, but with a few repetitions, you'll have it down in no time. Flow path control and management is extremely important on today's fire ground. Here's a new lowering in technique when we have an extended ladder, potentially fully extended ladder, where we can't necessarily always judge perfectly how high that window sill is, and we want to make sure that we're not breaking the glass with the tip of the ladder in a VEIS operation. Or if the ladder's thrown for the potential of rescue or evacuation. Sometimes with the old method that's been taught historically in the academies is that last 2 feet is really hard to control the tip of the ladder, and it bangs off the building pretty hard. I think it's important to point out that there is a time and a place to be very aggressive and violent with ladders when we're trying to dent gutter lines and things like that if we're going for vertical vent operations. The lowering in techniques in this video are specifically shown in a very controlled, slow manner to show how much control you actually do have with this new technique. Here's a new technique where we use our body as a counterbalance to gently rest the ladder against the building. The ladder in this example is going to be thrown in the fly-in configuration, but this counterbalance lowering in technique will work in either fly-in or fly-out applications. We're going to do all the work off of the left side of this ladder just because I'm right-handed. So for left-handed folks, you can probably work off the right side of the ladder if that's more comfortable. The big key is your foot placement, in this case my right foot. I want to put my foot perpendicular to the left beam closest to me, as you see here in the close-up shot. This secures the ladder from walking away, and I'm going to reinforce that with my hand placement in the bed section of the ladder. The left leg is then going to extend in front of the ladder, working as that counterbalance as I slowly place the ladder into the gutter line. Here you can see the placement of the right hand is in the middle of the bed of the extension ladder, which is preventing the right side of the ladder from spinning around on me. Some firefighters prefer, and another option is to put your right hand on the right beam to prevent the ladder from flipping. From what we found, this is based on body size of the firefighter throwing the ladder. The left hand is pulling back a little bit and has most of the weight of the ladder in conjunction with the right foot and is preventing that ladder from rolling over. Depending on the angle of the throw, whether it's for rescue or if it's a garden level with a steeper angle, you might have to get pretty close to the ground to get that counterbalance to work effectively. This section will address a technique called shooting the tip. This is a handy little technique when we're going for speed on really light ladders like the 14 or the 16 foot straight roof ladders, or if we have overhangs that are impeding progress for a beam throw or a flat throw won't necessarily work. This also works for grade changes, as you can see in this example here. So get out, practice with your companies, work on shooting the tip, get creative with your training. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to either us or any of the truck companies. We'll be happy to get out and throw some ladders. Also remember that training division has quite a few ladders in the cache out there, including a 35-2 section that engine companies can get out and throw at their leisure. Ladders up.